Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining today. I am really excited to talk about this conversation with you all around just revenue growth and all the things that come with it when you're a business owner and you're in that place where revenue is growing, but sometimes it's telling a different story than what you would like it to. So, one of the things I always like to start out with, have you ever grown revenue and you actually felt more stressed instead of less? And let's be honest with this. Revenue's gone up, sales look strong, the business looked healthy from the outside, but yet you're more tense, maybe cash felt tighter, decisions are feeling heavier, you might have some debt that's coming around, and somehow instead of more revenue actually creating things to make it easier, everything actually feels harder, which is something we never want to feel, right? So it's not random, it's not because you're bad at business, it's usually because growth doesn't fix broken infrastructure, it exposes it. Most founders believe growth solves problems. And I think I'm guilty of that as well. When I had first started my business, it's, hey, if I can just get to this growth part, everything's going to be great. I get to that level, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's terrible. So it's one of those where you just kind of see things from a different perspective. And more revenue means more margin. We think a lot of times, we also think that more margin is going to create that breathing room that we wanted. And then that more breathing room is going to actually equal less stress. That's the theory, right? That's what we've all kind of been promised and sold. But in real life, growth is actually a stress multiplier, I think. It amplifies something that's already weak. And here's the part that nobody really wants to talk out loud about. It is, if your systems were built when you had a dollar in the bank, they're not usually designed for when you hit the $10 million mark or the $3 million or whatever mark that you're at today. You can't play, you can't play varsity level business with freshman level infrastructure. And I like to give the example of football, mainly looking at high school football. If you're on a freshman team, you're not going to be able to play on the varsity level because you're going to get hit harder and you're not trained to get hit harder yet. And how are you going to bounce back from that and the resilience that comes with it? And those hard hits, they come as the game speeds up. And that's where you want to be able to see that, growth is essentially a contact sport. If you don't build strength first, you're going to feel every hit. How many times in a variety of sports that we've all played, when you start to move up to that next level, the competition is different. And like I said, the hits come a little bit harder, whatever that looks like. And are you ready for that? And if you don't build the strength first, how are you going to withstand when things do get harder? So today I want to walk through something I see over and over again, whether you're a $3 million or a $10 million, a 12, 15, whatever that looks like. But smart founders, hard workers, and good businesses, growth quietly starts hurting them. And it's not because growth is bad, but because readiness matters. So let me show you exactly what happens when growth starts to outpace infrastructure, because this isn't theoretical, it is a pattern. And I've seen this movie before. I'm sure a lot of you have, by just living it out yourself, or even just seeing it through friends and family that do own businesses. And if you're in that $3 to $20 million range, you've probably lived at least part of this. So here's how it usually starts. Revenue increases. You're like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Orders are up, customers are really buying, my team is getting busy. And on paper, everything looks like it's working, right? But here's what happens next. Inventory starts to expand. You're needing more raw materials to fulfill the orders. You're needing more finished goods. You're implementing and bringing new SKUs in. Now there's more purchasing. And inventory doesn't always grow linear. It grows in chunks. So now you got, you have too much inventory over on one side. Maybe you buffered for the demand and you tried to avoid, running out of stock, and suddenly you have all this inventory sitting on your shelf. And we all know inventory costs money. So now cash starts getting tightened because it's sitting on the shelf, it's not moving. And it's usually because you're not unprofitable. It really comes down to those cash timing matters. Revenue doesn't mean, there's cash in the bank. We all have known this. There's a lot of things that come in and absorb the revenue. And that usually is inventory. It gets absorbed very quickly. It's payroll comes in and takes the next big hit. Our vendors are starting to not necessarily be paid on their 30, 60, or 90-day terms. You're having to ask for extensions. And then on top of that, taxes come into play. And we all love that part where you're like, we're doing so great. And then all of these things start to come into place. So what do most founders do next? They start to lean on that line of credit. We're just going to smooth it out. We're just going to pull a little bit from it. It's temporary. It's fine. But if infrastructure hasn't caught up, now debt starts creeping in. And it's usually a pretty quiet, slow burn of debt coming in. And then growth, it can't keep up with this debt that's starting to loom and to grow. And with that, now we're turning into, hey, there's a lot more pressure on all the profit that's being taken. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, I think, is inventory isn't turning as quickly as expected because growth forecasting, maybe you were a little bit optimistic on it, or because systems aren't tracking the velocity accurately, or maybe reporting isn't aligned to the operations. So now you have a product sitting longer than it should. And when that product sits, the next natural thing to do with it is, all right, we got to discount it because we got to get this moved off the shelf. We got to get this out of here. I need to bring in some money. And now the margin gets compressed. And here's the part I feel like no one really talks about, and the founder feels it first. Your sleep starts getting a little bit lighter. You're not sleeping through the night. Decisions are feeling heavier. Hiring feels riskier. Every expense coming through seems bigger than what it normally was. You're still growing, but there's a little bit more of a fragile feel to how it's growing. Then eventually the team starts to feel it too. They feel a little bit of the tension in the meetings. They sense there's urgency that's now more pressure based. And they also are starting to think or even not think, but necessarily they're feeling more reactive decisions are being made. Even though growth is still happening, but now confidence is starting to shrink. And what comes from that? There's kind of a chain reaction. It's not a sales problem. It's not a marketing problem. It's really not even a people problem. It's that infrastructure gap. And that's where your revenue gets exposed because it wasn't built to scale. And I think the hard truth about this is most founders think, oh, we just need to grow a little bit more. That's going to fix all our problems. But more growth without stronger foundation is just going to magnify that strain. And let's talk about what should have been built before the growth actually accelerated. So if growth exposes weak infrastructure, what should have been built first? Because I would say I'm not anti-growth, I'm anti-blind growth. And you need to be able to, grow in a way that you can see what's going, not just blindly saying, all right, we're throwing spaghetti, we're going to see where it sticks on the walls. You need to have some things in place. And I've come across where I think there's 5 fundamental things that need to exist before you can really accelerate, not after, but you got to plan this before. The first one I've seen is visibility. And I don't mean, you're getting a P&L once a month. I mean, you're getting real visibility on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. You want to be able to predict your cash flow. Are you even able to look 90 days out and know for sure? Not just guessing, but being able to predict it. Do you know with confidence how much runway you have if revenue dips 10%? Do you know what happens to margin if you start to discount things to get them off your shelf? Is that going to allow you to cover your fixed costs that month, when you start to heavily discount? If the answer is no to any of these, then you're operating more reactively. And we all know that reactive growth is expensive, right? Secondly, I would say unit economics, you need to have clarity around it. Do you understand what you make per product, per service, per channel that you're selling through? You don't need to know overall growth margin, but you need to know the true unit economics, because if those are off by even a few percentage points, growth is going to start amplifying that error. And small errors at scale become bigger problems. And one of the exercises I like to run through with my clients is going through this unit economics. We're looking at, average order value. What does that look like? How many new customers came in the last 7 days? What was our percentage of returning? How much was spent on ads? What are we down to as a profit per SKU after looking at all the expenses and ad spend, all of that? And then really looking at what are our costs per month? How many units do we need to sell to just cover those costs? And then that gives us a good idea of what our margin should be, and is our margin too low? And I was working with a client, and they're hovering at about a 48% margin. Well, we need to really bump that up to somewhere between 60 to 75% after all of that, because otherwise there's always going to be this strain that revenue isn't high enough. So those are where you start to see ways that you can easily kind of jump in and look at where are those small errors and try to fix those so they don't become that bigger problem. Thirdly is inventory. How quickly is your inventory turning? Is it sitting on the shelf a lot, and you're having to discount it more often than you want to? Do you know what SKUs are absorbing your costs? Do you have those marked out in your ABCs? A's are your SKUs that are high volume. They're turning over really quickly. They're your best sellers. B is the next one. C is, it kind of sits on the shelf. People don't seem to buy it as frequently, and it's a little bit more idle. And so really understanding what your SKUs make up is going to really help you when it comes to what is taking my cash away. So I think inventory is not just an operational metric. We know it's a cash decision. And when you can't track your inventory turnover properly, that's where your cash is going to get trapped, because it's not moving at the route that you would like it to. Fourth one I have is operationally aligned financial reporting. This is where I would see most businesses start to experience some breaking. This is where your accounting system should tell the story of how your business is run by department, the product lines, your channels, your cost drivers. But if your finances are just structured for tax compliant, you're not going to be able to make those operational type decisions. And if you can't make those type of decisions, then you start just ruffling paperwork here and there. You have a million Excel spreadsheets trying to do things and pull numbers off. But really, the accounting should explain your operations. And if it doesn't, there's a misalignment of how things were set up. And so a good example of this would be a lot of clients that have come to work with me, their chart of accounts is either set up by their CPA, or it's, QuickBooks saying, here's how we think you should set up your chart of accounts, which neither here nor there about who's right, who's not. But in order for a business owner to really make clear decisions and not feel this like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I should be doing, it's really important to evaluate all of the details of what you need to know to make operational decisions and have that be your chart of accounts when you look at your profit and loss statement. So it is telling you, the owner, the story of what's going on, not just the tax story, which is great. You need to know on a daily how your decisions can be made. The fifth one is a weekly rhythm. We don't want to just a month in look at all of the accounting. You need a weekly. What are you watching? What's been moved? What's changed? What actually needs your attention? And when you review numbers once a month, what are they telling you? Is somebody helping you understand what they are? Or do you always feel behind? Are you reviewing them on a weekly basis and somebody's kind of providing that for you so that you can lead? Or are you just waiting for them and saying, yeah, every 30 days I get them and I'm always looking in the rear view mirror? It's really difficult to be able to plan accordingly. So growth doesn't require perfection. It requires rhythm. And when you start to get that rhythm built in with this type of reporting, you're going to start to have additional confidence in your numbers and in your business, and you're going to be able to lead in a very different way. So let me say something though is we kind of look at infrastructure as well, as you don't need a mass, system to run everything tomorrow. You don't need to hire all these new people. You don't need to feel panicked. You don't need a lot of other things. You really just need alignment between operations, finance, and technology. That's it. Because when these three are all aligned, that's where growth starts feeling less fragile. Everything is going to start to feel more intentional. So let's talk about how there's this identity shift, because it's a big part of it. Let's look at an example here. We have company A, we have company B. They both have the same revenue range. They're after the same industry. They have a different experience though between the two. So company A, they grow first. They assume growth is going to bring clarity. They hire fast. They order more inventory. They're kind of utilizing debt to lean on. They review their numbers always after the fact. So they're looking in that rearview mirror, trying to make decisions going forward. And when stress increases, they just push harder because they think, oh, you know what? We just need more revenue. That's going to solve all of our problems. But deep down, they don't truly trust those numbers. So growing feels risky. Now we look at the other company, company B. They're doing the same thing. They're building first. They build visibility. They build reporting that actually reflects their operations. So now they have this very clear rhythm and understanding. When they go to really push the gas pedal to grow, they don't feel fragile. It feels more earned. So it becomes a lot easier. Growth isn't necessarily the reward. It's infrastructure is that foundation. And you really need to make sure that is put into place from day one. And here's the part I want you to really think about if you're scared to grow. And I get it. I have been in that place multiple times throughout my career as a business owner. There's just those risks. And it's probably not because you're lacking the ambition to do so. It usually is always around clarity. And that's what's fixable. And that's the best part of it. And I will say every time in my business where I've wanted to grow and it seems risky and I'm like, I don't know, should I not? It's because I don't have a clear plan of where I want to go. It's like when you look through a lens and it's just a little foggy and you gotta, adjust the lens to get it clear till you see that path of where you're going to go. And that makes it where once you have that, you don't have to guess. You don't have to feel behind now that you're not moving where you want to go. You don't have to hope that, hey, hopefully things are going to kind of smooth out and it'll get a little bit better. You're able to see a lot better because you've built those systems that you can really lean on. And now you have that strong foundation. You can make decisions that are 90 days out instead of 3 days late because you can really plan your cash flow. And I think the last part is you can talk about growth with confidence instead of caution. And for me, that has been one of the biggest parts as I've been able to gain clarity with my own business throughout the years, that now when I know I need to grow, there's this confidence of, well, I've done it before. I kind of know what I should build and keep moving. And that shift, it's really changed everything for me, not just financially, emotionally, but even for you, the founder, is if you were to do this, now your sleep's going to improve. Your meetings feel a little bit calmer. Decisions feel very grounded. And that starts going throughout your organization. Your team is going to feel it as well. And that's where everybody then gets to a point where they're all confident. So if revenue is increasing, but stress is increasing with it, I always say don't just push harder. You need to ask yourself, is my infrastructure ready for the big leagues here that I'm trying to play in? Because growth is going to come. The only question you have to ask yourself is, when will it? When will it grow, and how will that growth expose me or elevate me? That's the difference. So here's all the things that, when revenue's up, and sometimes why doesn't make sense along the way. Just all the things that I've seen. So hopefully this resonated with you. I'd love to hear from you. As always, I'm Christy Barber with Christy Barber Consulting, and I work with founders who are serious about building infrastructure that supports growth, not just chasing revenue. So if you have questions about your systems, your numbers, or whatever stage you're navigating in your business today, feel free to reach out. I love hearing from you all and just understanding how your businesses are doing. And if there's anything I can do to help, I'm always happy to have that conversation. So I'm looking forward to discussing more of this with you in the coming weeks as we really dive into some of the things that founders really look at, and just business operators in general, as they're trying to grow their business. So thank you so much for joining. And